Okay, so we're going to get started here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the sixth in a series of what we call the Keep Your Business Moving bite-sized webinars, brought to you by Merchants Fleet, the nation's fastest growing fleet management company, serving those companies that leverage vehicles to do their jobs and get goods and services to their clients. We hope that everyone on the call is safe and well as states begin to reopen and businesses either get back on the road or continue to adapt to changing conditions. My name is Amanda Rogers. I serve as the Vice President of Marketing and Innovation here at Merchants. I'll be today's moderator as we discuss how fleets can take advantage of the current climate to embrace change, innovate, and seize new opportunities. Throughout our discussion today, please do not hesitate to send questions in the chat and we'll go to our experts and they will address them at the end. So let's get right to it. I'm joined by three experts in the innovation and operations spaces, two of which are on and one will be joining us. And since these are bite-sized webinars, I did ask our panelists to bring a snack with them that has kept them moving during this time. And I always have one with me. Today I have watermelon. It's a little warm up here in New England. So with that, I'd first like to introduce Will Zemp from Southern New Hampshire University. Hi, Will.
Hi, how are you, Amanda?
I'm good. If you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about your organization and your role at SNHU.
Sure. So right now I'm the EVP for Educational and Business Transformation at Southern New Hampshire University. But before that, I was the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer. So at Southern New Hampshire, we've got about 100,000 students nationally on our online university, and about anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 face-to-face here in Manchester. And so my job primarily is to kind of facilitate and lead really large transformation efforts to find places where technology can enhance human-human relationships, and then help people that really are kind of closest to the thing that we value most, which is our students, and just help them to manage change and get to solutions that they know are best for their student. So thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining. Yeah. Great. Thank you. All right. And then we also have our own Lisa Bonacci, my colleague here at Merchants. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good. Hi, Amanda.
Good.
Hi, everyone.
What do you have, if you wouldn't mind, just tell us a little bit about your role and what your impact is with fleets here.
Sure. So my snack today is butter snap pretzels. Love them. So my name is Lisa Bonacci. I'm the Director of Innovation for Merchants Fleet. So my role is to help merchants be prepared for the future. So my team designs and tests new programs and pilots to embrace change, and with the goal of creating innovative solutions for client needs. So if you're a merchant's client right now, then you've probably seen some of our programs that have come out of our space.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. And finally, I believe I have Dozie on the call. Dozie Okeleke, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Dozie. How are you?
Hi. Doing very well. How are you doing?
Good. So would love to hear a little bit about your background, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with our attendees.
Absolutely. So my name is Dozie Okeleke. I'm an e-commerce and logistics expert. Over the last 10 years, I have basically worked across different multinationals and different geographies, more in the corporate entrepreneurship line. And so helping with, new innovation from within large corporates, helping launch new initiatives and scale them. And so I've done that in consumer goods and currently doing that in the e-commerce space in North America.
Great, thanks, Dozie. And what do you have for snack today?
I have a cookie bar. Not sure you can see it, but it's a Twix cookie bar.
Those are my favorite. Thank you. All right. So before we get into the discussion and I turn over to the experts here, I did want to do a little level setting and provide a little bit of context for our discussion. So while the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly been challenging, it has also provided an environment of accelerated change that offers a unique chance for businesses really think and act differently at this time, including in the area of fleet. I think a lot of our fleet clients are really evaluating what their needs are and how they can leverage different programs and services and maybe do a delivery at this time. There have been some great opportunities for businesses to realize new ways of delivering services overall and optimizing operations. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here today, are those opportunities that have come up. And so I'd like to start with a little discussion about how our partners have been managing and what some of your thoughts are in terms of innovation and change at this time. And so I know, having worked with all of you previously, that one thing that's really important in innovation is the recognition of value of failure, and what good failure or bad failure can be in innovation. And so I'll start with you, Will, here on this one. And my question to you is, what do you think the role of failure is in embracing innovation and change for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think you teed it up right. Let me start by kind of addressing the cliche. So the cliche celebrating failure totally misses the point, and I think it gives a free pass. What we should be celebrating is learning, not failure. And kind of let me go into this. So creating a culture that at the same time values learning through failure and outstanding performance is difficult enough. And it's going to be really hard for organizations that have a history of neither. A good start for leaders to orient around is to clearly articulate the difference between productive and unproductive failures, to sit down with people and go through that, to even rehearse a failure long before it happens. Productive failures are going to yield valuable information relative to their costs. They're not going to be a waste. And then a failure is only celebrated if it results in learning. So for all their tolerance, right, for all the rhetoric and bumper stickers, and their focus on the tolerance for failure, successful organizations are intolerant of incompetence. They set exceptionally high standard performance for the people. They recruit the best talent they can, and then they explore risky ideas that ultimately fail is fine. But mediocre, technical skills, sloppy thinking, bad work habits, and poor management are just intolerable.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think what I learn and take away from you there, Will, is that the importance of knowing the difference between maybe a good failure and a bad failure, and then how you can learn from those and looking at it maybe a little differently. And so, Dozie, I'd love to turn this one over to you. Given that context, what do you think is the role of failure in embracing innovation and change?
That's a very interesting question. I think it starts with, first of all, accepting that failure is part of the innovation process, right? And so I don't know of any innovation process that does not have some element of failure. I think then the question is, what kind of failure? And does failure open up learning opportunities for continuous innovation, or is the failure based on actions that could have been avoided in the innovation process, right? And so I think there's a big role that failure has to play in there. I think it should be failure not based on mediocrity or, like I said, avoidable actions. It should be failure that opens up learning opportunities and that fosters continuous innovation as we get through like the iteration process. And innovators need to be self-critical about their ideas and initiatives. When you become self-critical, you open up the opportunity for you to address concerns or questions or things that could potentially happen down the line. And as long as you're self-critical to the point where you don't lose acceleration in your innovation process. And so it starts with being self-critical by yourself, but then also working with right stakeholders to ensure that whatever innovation idea you have in the pipeline is being vetted and being criticized constructively as you iterate on it. So some of the opportunities you see in the innovation space as a result of innovators not being self-critical enough or not engaging with the right stakeholders in the innovation process. And so I think failure is part of the process. But to Will's point, it is it has to be failure that opens up learning opportunities. It cannot be failure that's based on avoidable actions, right? And that's where the whole idea of vetting and being very critical with your innovation process comes into play.
Mm-hmm. Great points, Dozie. Thank you for that. And Lisa, you're leading the innovation charge here at Merchants. What are some of your thoughts about the role of failure?
Sure. So first, I think as leaders, we need to help our organizations reframe our mindset about failure. So anytime you have failure, there is a learning experience, to what Will said. But I think you have to be really intentional about it. So for example, at Merchants, anytime we're going to test something, we label it as a pilot. And I think that helps just kind of give people the space to fail, because you're alleviating that fear of what if it doesn't work. So I think if you set up a pilot as an intentional learning experience, then I think what you can do is start with a hypothesis. And this is how I have people set it up on our teams here, and design a pilot then with the lowest possible resources so that you're testing that hypothesis. And you want to find out, what do you want to learn from that experience so you can test it out before you scale it. Because I think one of the things that we found is you'd rather fail with something that maybe cost you $2,000 in a couple weeks of time than, a lot of money and a lot of resources and a lot of time. So when you do this, I think you also find people at all levels of the organization that are willing to share their great ideas because you've set it up in such a way. And I think often your best ideas come from people from across the organization, especially those who are speaking directly to your clients, because they are so in touch with client needs and pain points. So I think setting it up in this way allows for those people to not kind of fear their own ideas before it even gets started. And then I think the last thing is making sure that you are rewarding failure in the right way. So, if you're testing that hypothesis, you're rewarding your metrics as far as, did the pilot go well? Did it test our hypothesis with lowest possible resources, rather than, is it something that we want to scale? Because sometimes killing a project can be just as productive as seeing all the way through and scaling it, because you didn't waste your time and energy on those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, I'll use an example here. So let's say a company wanted to implement a new driver behavior incentive program, incentivizing drivers to make smart decisions. You may start with a smaller group of drivers, and maybe it's 3, 4, 5 drivers across a larger fleet. And maybe they're drivers that will give good feedback, and you implement the program and you roll it out with them, and you get feedback on it, and you see if it improves behavior, and if it doesn't, where can you tweak or change? And if it's just not the right program, you didn't invest in the training that's going to impact many people, and then have to rework it. You've got 4 or 5 people that are working nimbly, and they understand that it may be a temporary pilot of some sort. So thank you guys. I think that those are great points about leveraging the power of failure, and also how you can use it to ultimately drive success, which at the end of the day is what we want. So I'd like to move on to another question here. I'm going to start with you, Dozie, on this one. But one thing that we hear a lot about right now is how do I balance the short-term and long-term, the challenges of a pandemic that are being presented right now are requiring leaders to think in the short term and make some short-term decisions, and then also have to balance and continue to look long term. So from your perspective, how do you think others should look to the future when they're so focused on today?
Yeah, I think the pandemic is a very interesting case, right? It's forced literally everyone to innovate, from individuals who are having to just work from home and adjust to what that looks like, to companies who have had to totally reinvent their business models or pivot from like conventional business to verticals that they never actually imagined like they would run in such a short period of time. So I think like the pandemic is an edge case, but it then introduces a new phenomenon around, one, how do you innovate in such a short period of time so that you can keep business continuity for the long run, right? And so in the short term, innovation oftentimes is how to get the business going, right? The long-term innovation process sometimes is really about a vision or a mission, right? And so that mission could be hinged on a customer dream, or an ideal around how you want to improve a process, or how you want to reinvent like an entire industry. So I think in the short term, and the pandemic then helps us really understand why it's important. In the short term, you want to think about what's priority for business continuity, right? Sometimes it's really about business survival, and then you find yourself having to innovate and pivot from convention. But I think what's more important for leaders is the short-term view should always feed into the long-term view. And I think that's where it gets very hard to strike the right balance, right? Because most times short-term innovation is usually around short-term or mid-term views. Long-term is often based on a much bigger promise or an ambition or a dream. What I've seen great leaders do is define the long-term vision, and define it in the sense where it's a bit broad, but then it gives everyone in the organization basically like a mental framework to work with, such that when they have to make short-term decisions or innovate in the short term, that big picture then stays, actually very clear to them. I'll give you a typical example. Is you build a business like in a sharing economy where you're focused on improving the livelihoods of your customers, or making processes that simpler for people to do, and then you get into a pandemic, and let's say your business isn't like ride sharing, and you realize during the pandemic people do not want to get into vehicles because they're concerned about their safety, and then you pivot from that to food delivery services, because then it's still the same business model, still the same infrastructure, but then you can understand that the times have changed. And so for business continuity, you have to then pivot. If you stuck to the ride sharing business model, you could be out of business, bankrupt in a couple of weeks or months, because that market and that time is not receptive to your services. But then having a business model and being able to quickly innovate, I saw a lot of startup companies just like quickly pivot within weeks to help support during the time of the pandemic. And so I think at the end of the day, the goal is there. We want to serve customers. We want to make deliveries easier to customers, but then you build your business model in a way that you can actually explore new verticals when the issue of business continuity becomes critical to you.
Absolutely, and you share some really good examples, and I think one that occurred to me when you were saying that, well, you have companies that have shifted to delivering services and delivering product, and then you also have companies that have maybe a manufacturing core capability that are shifting their manufacturing arm to be able to manufacture masks. And let's say I'm a fashion organization, and right now, great masks are fashionable. And so that fits in my long-term vision as well, and it may be something that continues. So really great perspective, Dozie. Thank you. Lisa, let's go to you. What do you think?
Sure. So first of all, Dozie, I love what you said about long-term being about living out your mission, and the short-term being about business continuity. I think it's really difficult as leaders to try to figure out how to balance short and long-term. And I think it comes down to two things. So client needs are constantly changing, but if you can do one, solve for their current pain points as quickly as possible. And, that's something that we did during COVID. There were some programs and things that we put in place because we had some clients undergoing challenges that we didn't expect, but then continue to make big bets on what the customer will need for the future, I think is equally as important. So I'll give you an example. I think it would be really easy to have abandoned some of the projects we've been working on that are more long-term. So one example is electric vehicles. I think right now gas prices are so low, and it's been a conversation for a number of years, but I think adoption, while paused right now, is definitely going to be something that our clients are going to be asking for more in the future. And rather than abandon that project, we're continuing to work on those things because we know that the development of those programs is going to be so important for our clients in the future. So I think it's really important to continue to project some of those things and continue working on those longer term projects because we want to make sure that our clients can take advantage of the new vehicles that Rivian and Lordstown and others are going to be putting out there, because we know it's going to impact their business long term.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Will, anything you'd add to this discussion about looking to the future?
Yeah, I just punctuate everything that's been said on the short and immediate term. I think both panelists have kind of outlined that. What I'd like to do is then kind of take what they've both outlined as challenges and orient on the long term real quick. Whether it's a compliance issue, whether it's a technology issue, whether the human's ability to have that skill, any kind of leadership orientation to the future, you got to be ready to be disappointed. And it's one thing to be an operator of excellence, but it's another thing to be an innovator. And if you're not sufficiently disappointed with the way the future's treating you, then you're not doing it right. One of the automotive presidents came out and said that he's going to see more change in the next 5 years than there's been in the last 50. So think about the themes we've had so far with failure, with compliance. It'll be one thing. We may figure out an automotive car next week, but until the insurance companies decide that they'll insure it, you're limited. So, but that you should embrace that kind of thing. What I'd leave you with is, a leader should be seeking clarity from the future, not certainty. And the future is going to reward that kind of orientation around clarity. It's going to punish people that are just trying to seek certainty from an aspect of the future that they can't get yet. So again, I just think it comes down with the kind of the orientation, the ready to get the work done, the ready to learn, as opposed to that celebration of failure like we were talking about before. But you damn well better be disappointed, or you're not doing it right.
Well, you talk about leadership, Will, and that's a good dovetail into my next question here, which is about leading through change. So what do you think are some of the important tools that leaders can use to inspire change and to navigate through change because it's happening? And what are some of the things that you think that they should be focusing on?
Taking it to me, Amanda?
Yeah.
Again? Yeah, so I think the tools are there, but I think, what leaders need for change in the future is not something that you would get in an MBA class. And so I think the characteristics of leadership change. And, what you're going to need, if you had a tool in the toolbox, you're going to need an unyielding belief in human potential. Our most magnificent moments that are to come in the next 5 years will come from our people, not from a silver bullet of technology. It's from that mechanic. It's from, that figures it out. It's going to be from the driver that figures it out. It's going to be from the people that try and try again. It's going to be, valuing impact over influence, kind of what has this actually done? And then, operating, with an open mind and an open heart and an open will to try things, not micromanage, and just, trusting in emergent technology, emergent points of view. So I think that's it. I would say, we have most things, but the characteristics of what a leader needs to be for the future, especially where the nexus of skill and industry and technology have come together, is very different than probably what it needed to be 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And what I really like about, that is an inspiring comment about a belief in human potential. And I think that integrates some of those amazing technology tools we have, because it's only going to accelerate human potential, what's possible for our people. So really good points. Thanks, Will. Dozie, why don't we go over to you for this one? What do you think are some of those tools?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, like to Will's point, I don't think this is like a technological tool. There may be tools that help with the innovation process itself. I think leading through change for leaders of organization starts with, one, understanding where your organization is, and then defining the mental model you want to work with that would foster innovation, right? And so that understanding of here's where we are as a team, as an organization, is very important, because then you can then see what opportunities you have to create a more innovative environment. I think I'll reflect back to some experience I had 7 years ago, where there was a problem within a team I was working with was a very visible problem. So I'd been an end user, and I mean, the systems did not exist to enable me to have the right business conversations with my customers. And then every time I needed some kind of information to work out, like, you know, an ROI analysis, it was, you know, I had to pull from different points, right? And I thought about it and I said, hey, this is a very simple opportunity to it's a very good opportunity to simplify the experience for a lot of the account managers out there in the field, and also for our partners out there. However, the thing was, everyone knew the problem. Everyone knew the problem, right? But people were stuck in dealing with the problem with a band-aid, than taking a step back and thinking, how do we innovate? It was also as a result of the environment at that time, right? And so what was important for me, even as a leader who had to step up and say, hey, let's fix this, was I understood where the organization was with respect to change. And so that informed my approach to innovation, which is, one, how do I get everyone who's a stakeholder in this space to basically walk within the same mental model that I had about the innovation itself? And so that was the first. First was, here's where we are. Here's how people see the problem. The second is, what mental framework do I want everyone to work with so we can get to an outcome or a solution? And that, you know, it really involved for me defining the problem itself, and then also defining the mental framework. One, we needed to be flexible and nimble enough. So once everybody could come on board and understand the problem statements, then we needed to be flexible enough. Two, we needed to be comfortable deploying a scrappy solution that could alleviate some of the pain for the customer, right? While also thinking, as a multinational, what's the long-term picture, right? And so this was a customer pain point that had grown into a stakeholder pain point, at least for the field team. And it was really about getting everyone in finance, in IT, and helping everyone understand the problem statement, selling basically the business problem and the upside, and then getting everyone into that mental framework of, let's go with a scrappy solve that helps us reduce the workload by X in the short term. In the long term, here's a bold vision we should have for solving just not this problem, but like every related problem in this space. It had to do with customer account management. And so I think that's the first step as a leader. Understand where the organization is, understand where your team is, then define the mental framework. The mental framework may already exist through, like, you know, principles within the organization or standards of leadership, but define the mental framework that actually fosters innovation. And I think the last piece is, get people to constantly question the process and look for opportunities to improve, right? Because that then helps you, as the innovator who's leading the project, or as the leader of the organization, to see opportunities. Once you have an environment where people can question and probe and constructively, like, criticize a process or the way of doing things, then you basically start seeing opportunities come up. And some of your biggest opportunities as a business organization may not be in that closed you know, room of innovation experts. It could actually come from some random stakeholder in the organization who has actually seen things from a different perspective. And then that's where you start building from. So that's how I would recommend within an organization that you drive change.
Great, Dozie. And I think you're spot on that sometimes the people that are closest to the problem have the greatest opportunity to provide the solutions. And so I'll go to Lisa on this one in terms of tools. You've implemented quite a few of them here at Merchants and with our clients. So would love your perspective on leading through change here.
Yeah, so first I'll start with the fact that change is hard. I think the fact, just starting with that and recognizing it, then taking that and focusing entirely on the customer is really important, because the reason why change is so difficult is because there's a lot of emotions involved from, you know, the customer side, but then also the internal side. But if you continue to focus on the customer and what they need from you, it all becomes clear what you need to do and what needs to be done. People will volunteer for themselves to be part of that change. But at Merchants, so a couple tools that we use, I think we use frameworks like design thinking to get laser focused on customer challenges. I think that's really important, especially during times of rapid change. And what we do is listen for what the customer isn't telling you. So there's a famous Henry Ford quote where he talks about, you know, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So you want to listen for the things that your customer's telling you, but also the things that your customer's not telling you. And then similar to what Dozie said, you know, you want to identify what that problem is that you're trying to solve for your customers and put your best and most imaginative people on designing solutions for them. One of the other tools that we've used at merchants is scenario planning. So not only do you want to think about what your customer challenges are today, but also project out what your customer's challenges might be in the future. So continuing to ask yourself some of those what if questions and be prepared to answer some of those things, whether they are in your favor or not in your favor, so that you know as a team how you're going to respond to whether or not that thing happens. And the great thing about scenario planning is it never goes to waste. I think, you know, even if you had planned for a recession and we had COVID happen, you'd be 90% there for what you were going to do and how you were going to respond to that thing, even if it's not exactly what you had planned for. So those are a couple tools that we've used.
Yeah, and you know, I'm a big fan of design thinking, and I think what I like about this discussion and how I'll kind of wrap it up here is that, you know, a lot of people think innovation and creativity are the same thing. And I think one of the things I take away from this discussion in terms of innovation is that, you know, sometimes it's not an art all the time. There are tools and there's a science behind it, that mental framework that you talked about, Dozie, that then enables that creativity to happen. But if you go to a blank whiteboard, sometimes that's not always the best way to start. Sometimes asking a what if question or working off of a framework that you currently have or looking at a process as it stands today and trying to reimagine it are some of the things that are, you know, frameworks that can lead to that creativity and innovation. So I really like that.
Amanda, real quick, just because I think Lisa's point is so important about change and the orientation of this complexity and just how hard it is. But if you don't like how this feels, if you don't like how change feels, you know, you're going to hate, you don't like change, you're going to hate being irrelevant, right? And so you got to make a choice at some point. So
yeah, because things are always changing, and we can't, you know, we have countless examples of companies that didn't seize the opportunity when they had it or weren't willing to make that change when it was there. All really good points, and I think, you know, thinking about our fleet clients specifically in terms of asking those what if questions and scenario planning, you know, thinking of things like fuel prices and electric vehicles and automated and autonomous vehicles, and even different scenarios like if we were to expand into a new market, what would we do? If we were to see tremendous demand growth in certain areas, how would we navigate that? So just thinking through different scenarios that we need to be planning for. We are a little over time, but we have had quite a few questions come in. I'll address just one of them on this call, and then we can always circle them around. But I'll just open it up to the panel. We have a question: what is the biggest incentive to encourage innovation? So how do you all encourage innovation?
So I can go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
So you have to plan it out, right? A lot of times resistance, the counter to not having an incentive plan that accompanies change is resistance. So it has to be in your plan. What I'd say is probably the number one thing I find is, and I got the data to back it up, is people want ownership. So, you know, how do you patent? How do you, you know, are you facilitating that person's recognition associated with the new thing, right? Some companies do that, some companies don't, but you address it. The other thing is you pay people for their time, right? It's even for the failures, if they are turned into learning. Probably the biggest thing is don't waste people's time. That's a big incentive, right? Plan stuff out, ensure that people have been given the time to work on the new things that they're told to. Right, but don't give them an 8-hour day and then say, oh, on top of that, I want you to be this really cool, creative person. So don't innovate for innovation's sake. I mean, that's bullshit. It tears people up, and it makes people actually actively resistant, to the next random thought generator or good idea fairy that comes along. So, people need to go in, they need to know that there's going to be some kind of plan. So kind of the biggest incentive is to have a plan in place for every kind of major initiative.
Great points. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Dozie.
let me jump in here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just reflecting, right? And I'm thinking my foray into corporate entrepreneurship actually started from that opportunity I talked about, where I had managed an account, experienced the pain points, and then I had the opportunity on the back end to fix the problem. And I think over the years, what I have seen really helps as a good incentive to encourage innovation is, to Will's point, innovation should not be outside of what you expect your employees to do from their day job, right? It should be a core part of the day job. And so you need to encourage people within your teams or organization to innovate. And you need to assess them based on that, right? Now, not everyone is a creative thinker. But innovation could even be centered around process improvements. It could be centered around, and all these add up to either helping your bottom line or your top line numbers. So that's one. The second piece is recognition, right? And whether that form of recognition is, people have different kind of motivators, intrinsic or extrinsic. But what helps is celebrating innovation and recognizing people who actually drive innovation. And it doesn't have to be the next groundbreaking idea. Every little improvement where you see some form of innovation take place and you see its impact on the business should be celebrated. The more people see that they're being recognized for innovating, the more they're more likely to continue innovating. It's just a cycle. And so that's also how you help build an environment and culture around innovation. When innovation is celebrated, recognition applies, and even for every success, right? And then of course, for like the big innovations that have significant impact, you can go the extra mile and have some form of like standing recognition programs within your organization to recognize people who actually do the big stuff. But it starts with the everyday, daily celebration of innovative ideas that actually contribute. So it's not the spur of the moment, oh, I have a great idea. No, it is, I innovated and I fixed this problem or resolved this bottleneck. And it doesn't necessarily have to be with like, high tech. It is, I can leverage, basic tools to solve a problem and innovate in this space. And that recognition comes in. I think that's how continually you just build an environment where people just want to jump in and just continue innovating and improving things within your team's organization.
Yeah, celebrating those little things, but making sure that they are more than just a thought, but all those little things can add up to the big things for sure. Thanks, Dozie. Lisa, anything you'd add here?
Yeah, I won't say too much because I think what they both said is really good already. What I'll just say is that, at Merchants, one thing that we found to be really successful is to help break down innovation into big and small innovation. So I think a lot of times when people think about innovation, they're thinking about the Googles and the Apples of the world and the big grand things that can come out of their inventions, but they don't always think about the small improvements that they can make at the customer level as being innovations. And sometimes those small things add up to so much more for your customer than you would ever realize. So I think anytime you can reward experiences and innovations within the teams that you do have and make it so that they feel like their contribution was recognized is incredibly important, because then they'll continue to do that over and over again. And I think all those small ones really add up to even more than sometimes the big groundbreaking or disruptive innovations that we typically think of.
Absolutely. And I think creating that culture and asking for those innovations and bringing them up and allowing anyone in the organization to be recognized for change and executing change are all really important points. Thank you for those questions. So we're going to wrap up here. Really appreciate all of the tremendous insights, all of our attendees. Thank you for joining us. Just as a reminder, we will be sharing webinars weekly. And our next one of this kind will be on Tuesday, June 16th, again at noon Eastern Time. We'll be hosting another roundtable discussion with some industry partners about how fleets can excel at their strategy for the remainder of 2020 and what we're seeing. For a sign-up link to this webinar, as well as recordings from our past webinars in this series, you can go to merchantsfleet.com/keep-moving, and we'll send out an email as well. Panelists, thank you for your time today. Really insightful discussion. Appreciate all of you. And to all of our attendees, thank you for your time today. And know that Merchants is here for you to keep you moving. Bye, everyone.